Hello, Sunshine. I'm ALEXI LALAS, and welcome to the State of the Union podcast, where we look at the beautiful game on and off the field through the lens of red, white, and blue-colored glasses. This week, we'll be talking, well, what stood out from all the leagues that are going on right now around the world. We'll be talking McKennie and Bale and Reyna and the Spurs documentary, MLS, my first retirement. I'll give you a little story about my first retirement and so much more. But first, joining me, as always, my friend, my colleague, my guiding light, David Mosse, a soccer savant and a Fox soccer researcher and writer extraordinaire. Mosse, how are you on this Monday, September 21st of the year 2020?
I am doing well and excited to talk about the Spurs documentary because not since The Sopranos have I seen you direct so much vitriol towards a television show via text. Some of the text exchanges we've had about this documentary the last few days have been frankly extraordinary. So I'm glad you now have the platform to tell the world your opinion of this Amazon Prime program.
All right, listen, as you all know, we usually start off the pod and give you our breakdown of things that we have watched. And yes, it is true, Mosse. I've come to the conclusion of the Tottenham Hotspur documentary called, I think it's called All or Nothing, right? Is that what it's called? All right. It's called All or Nothing. It's a 9-episode documentary. And basically it documents the 2019-2020 season of Spurs. And as we know, just in normal days, it would be, at least on the surface, interesting because you have Jose Mourinho, and it's a big club in Spurs with plenty of drama that goes on. But obviously this also goes through the entire transition into 2020 and the pandemic and how that affects it. All right. So that's the premise of it. I'm not gonna look. I'm gonna give you my. It's not gonna be a deep dive or anything here. In a word, underwhelmed, and I'll tell you why. I think you had mentioned over the last couple of episodes that Jose Mourinho is the star. Okay, and you're absolutely right. He is the star. Without him, it would be even worse. Okay, so he is the only saving grace. When it comes to Mourinho, I was not given any more insight into who he is. I already knew he was a character. I already knew he was a bigger than life type of personality, and I already knew that he saw that as an asset and used that and leveraged that in the way that he went about his business. There was nothing, and I mean nothing, that I gleaned when it came to a further understanding of what is, to many, arguably one of the great coaches ever to coach the game. Now, that's a little harsh on him because, as we say many, many times, a documentary or a reality series, which is really what it is, okay, is all in the editing. And there is a performance aspect to it. And this is a hell of a performance, but it's a hell of a performance in, I guess, what we called a lame script. So it might not be his fault. He may be an incredible mind, and certainly his results over the years and his body of work would say that is so. But you did not see that in any way. Number two, when it comes to, and this was where I will give him credit, he has nailed his team perfectly. It is the most milquetoast, boring, unenergetic, I'm trying to think of the word that properly encapsulates just how soft, that's it, soft a team it is, based on this documentary once again. And once again, it can be shaded different ways. But everything that he said about his team lacking fight and being soft is on display, all right? This is not a team that I would ever want to go to battle with. Now, was it interesting? Not really. Was it entertaining? At moments, okay? You know, the drama that at times is manufactured in these reality series, I mean, it was so far, it was so lacking and limited. And yet I powered through it because of you, Mosse, because I wanted to make sure that I respected the format and I respected what we were doing here in order to give you my assessment of it. There are much, much better documentaries when it comes to the inner workings of what is going on. Hell, Ted Lasso is a better, more interesting, and more entertaining, and probably much more clear an accurate portrayal of what goes on in a club than what I just saw in Spurs All or Nothing. There you go. That is my review. What do you agree? And once again, if you haven't seen it, you should check it out. And we're not giving anything away other than I'm completely panning it here. But I'm not giving anything away because it's not like there's cliffhangers. It's not like there's anything amazing that you see or hear really when it comes to it. I will say this though, and this is my final thing. In watching Spurs now in this new season, there is a part of me that because I watched the documentary, I am in a strange way more attached to it. And yes, I will say more interested. So maybe all in all, when it all is said and done, they actually got their hooks into me and it achieved what they set out to do. All right, Mosse, what about you?
No, I mostly agree. I mean, I get some enjoyment out of all these documentaries, but there are some that really stand out, like Sunderland or Leeds, and then there are a bunch of others that are pretty formulaic and get tossed into the pile. And this is definitely tossed into the pile. They tried to build the whole thing around Jose Mourinho. They dispensed of Mauricio Pochettino rather quickly. It wasn't like he was sacked 2 weeks into the season. It was in November. And I saw Pochettino joking in an interview that, boy, I was there for 5.5 years and I got 35 minutes in the documentary. But, okay, I get that. They felt like Mourinho was a much more compelling personality, and so let's build it all around him. But, boy, the whole Mourinho thing got old around like episode 4 or 5. You have to be a real Mourinho groupie to be able to sit there and still be entertained with those halftime, speeches and pregame talks. I mean, all the way through. This was a slog to get through 9 episodes. And it actually, frankly, reminded me a little bit of the Manchester City one, which I didn't love either. When you build it too much around the manager, after a while, the novelty wears off of like I said, his pregame and halftime speeches. And if there's nothing else, if there aren't compelling personalities otherwise on the team, then yeah, it becomes a bit of a slog.
And here's the thing. And once again, I go back to, look, it might not be fair, but this is the way that Mourinho was portrayed. And yes, he is at times the show, okay? But he's the star of a lame show, okay? And when I think about Mourinho and the way that he is depicted, and just the banal and boring and hackneyed type of motivation, time and time again. I hear so much about this is a whole nother level and they're thinking on a different plane when it comes to the best players or the best managers in the world. And then I hear all of this crap that I know goes in one ear and out the other because it just gets completely lost about spirit and fight. How many times do we see Mourinho come in and say, you have to fight and you have to really want it, and nothing of any type of concrete instruction or motivation other than team spirit, and you gotta work harder, and you have to want to win, or we have to score. No, you have to score. How are you actually going to do that? And once again, maybe they took that out of the actual editing process and made it as, I guess, palatable or evergreen or big as possible. But in doing that, I think they do a disservice to Mourinho, if that's actually what they did it. And here's the potential dirty secret, is that he's actually exposed. And that this is really what Mourinho is ultimately all about. And it's not about X's and O's. And when it comes to the actual motivation, where certainly some coaches rest their hat, it's all used up and it doesn't affect players. And by the way, it has nothing to do with generations. It just doesn't affect players, okay? If you just sit there and scream and yell about, we got to score, we got to win, we got to play harder, we can't make mistakes. Yeah, thanks. Tell me something that I don't know. Tell me something that is going to make me better, that is going to make our team better, that I can't figure out for myself, or that as a team we don't already know. And that was few and far between. There were very, very few moments, if any, and I can't even remember one where I said, oh, I get it. I understand why he is the special one. All right, Mosse, anything else?
That's it.
Coming in hot right at the top of the show here, but I had to get it over. And like you said, I would, as we went through this, I would text you at different points, and it was texts fraught with angst and irritation and even bordering on anger at times. So I'm glad we got this out of the way. If there is a rating to be had, or a number or something like that, it's like a 2 out of 10. 10's the best, 0 is the worst. It's like a 2. 2 thumbs down, definitely. for me. Okay, enough of that. So we've gotten that out of the way. We'll talk more next week about some other viewing habits and things that we are looking at. But we wanted to make sure we hit on this because I know you had been watching it and you had been talking about it, and we had been teasing it for a number of weeks. And I finally finished. Thank God it's only 9 episodes and it's done. I don't have to watch that again. All right. Let's just jump right into it, Mosse. We're going to start out with, and maybe we buried the lead a little bit here, and we should have jumped right into this, but all sorts of American connections, and I think fair to start on this one. And that is Weston McKennie and what he did over the weekend. So what did he do? This is a young American player. This is a young American player who went over to Germany and became a professional, and in doing so grew into a incredible young man and soccer player over at Schalke, and then made the head-scratching and amazing and surprising to all of us move to Serie A, not just to Serie A, but to Juventus. And then on the first weekend of Serie A, as it opens with Andrea Pirlo as the new coach of Juventus, the perennial powers, a super club if there ever was one, he starts. He's in the starting 11, and then against Sampdoria, not only do they win, but he plays the entire game. He was wonderful from start to finish. Was he the best player on the field? No. Was it his best performance ever? No. But for an opening game, this was pretty special. It was memorable. It was something to be talked about, and I think it went as well as anybody could possibly expect. The only way it could have gone better is if he had scored a goal. And by the way, he even had opportunities to score a goal in the game. I watched the entire thing, and I watched it specifically because Weston McKennie was there, and I wanted to see what this looked like. In normal days, a Juventus-Sampdoria type of game, and I know Cristiano Ronaldo plays for the team, would it have been high on the priority list? No, but the fact that Weston McKennie is playing and what it means to the American soccer world, yeah, it was wonderful. It warmed the cockles of my redheaded heart, Mosse, to see it. And congratulations to him for the start. Still a long way to go, and a lot of different things could change going on, but so far, so good. 90 minutes into his Serie A career playing for Juventus.
Yeah, I wasn't all that surprised he was in the starting 11, only because he had played well in that friendly against Novara, and the Italian media had really been talking up all week that he might have earned himself a start against Sampdoria. And the point everybody keeps making, which I agree with, is that he possesses certain skills that no other midfielder in that squad possesses in terms of the energy and the ground that he covers, the ability to win the ball back, and also the ability to pop up in the box and score goals. And as you mentioned, he was very unlucky not to score in this game. The second goal, he took a shot the goalkeeper saved that Bonucci put in the rebound, and then had another shot that looked to me like it had crossed the line, but goal line technology said no. So yeah, I think that's going to get him on the field quite a bit this season because, we have made the Arturo Vidal comparison. Others have mentioned Edgar Davids, but it's sort of that sort of idea that you have a lot of talented technical players, but you do need that sort of energy guy to win the ball back and to do some of the dirty work. And so I think that is going to get him on the field pretty often this season.
To your point about the comparisons, and I want to bring this up because you're right. We've made a lot of comparisons. When this happened, the Italian press started to call me and wanted to get quotes about who this player is, because a lot of them had not really followed him and didn't really know a whole lot about him. And obviously, because of my background in Serie A, they wanted to get a comment from me. And so I started coming out, like you said, we compared him to Vidal, and I was talking about Gattuso's and N'Golo Kante's, and you mentioned Edgar Davids and these types of players. And when those comments started to come out, it was amazing to me the reaction from a lot of American fans. And this stems from something we talk about all the time, which is our insecurity and our legendary inferiority complex, and our fear, and this phenomenon where we purposely and very publicly lower expectations, and we coddle what are younger American players when they go to what we perceive as higher levels, in this effort that is designed to protect them, and it's rooted in this traditional type of fear that we have, that if we pump them up, or if we make comparisons to some great players like we have done, that it is ultimately going to hurt them. And my point to those people were that, no, we're in a different time. And this is good. The pressure and the comparisons, and more importantly, the higher expectations are not only good, they are logical. And when it really comes down to, Mosse, is that we, as a United States soccer playing nation, and a lot of this we frame through the national team, but whether it's that or just in general, we need players who can handle those high expectations. We need players who can handle the hype, and we need players who can handle that attention. That's exactly the type of players that we need. And I will submit to you that if players can't handle that, then number one, they're not that good, and they probably weren't made to be the stars and the players that we need going forward. So I completely dismiss and reject the notion that we shouldn't have higher expectations, that I'm hurting their chances of success by having the gall to compare them to others out there, and some very, very big players. We're at this point. And that Weston McKennie went out there and did that. Who knows how it's going to ultimately end. But then he did that with all of that attention and all that focus and all those high expectations. That says a lot about who he is as a person, and obviously who he is as a player. Mosse.
Yeah, and listen, when you compare a young player to an established star, to me, it doesn't necessarily mean you're saying he's going to be as good as the established star. You're just giving a sense of what kind of player he is. And people I know get really bent out of shape. How can you compare this guy who hasn't done anything to a guy who won this and that? It's just giving a sense of, for people who don't know, who have never seen him play, what kind of player, what his style of play is. So I don't know why people get so bent out of shape over that stuff.
All right, let's finish it here with Weston McKennie. And by the way, I think you hit the nail on the head with his specific role and position and how he can make it his own and how he can set himself apart. And we've talked about this in previous pods where, he's been asked to do so much at different places. By the way, ironically, he did show up at right back during that game, which he was fine with and he adjusted with. And I know it's just Sampdoria and they should beat them and it's not a great team. But the terrier or the pit bull-esque type of moments, even with the small crowd that was there, you could tell that they appreciated that. They appreciated that effort, and they appreciated that type of player, because I think they all recognize, as you mentioned, that this is a player that they lack and that they need going forward. And I'll finish it with this. It was amazing to see, after Cristiano finally got his goal, because he had been stymied a couple times and you could see the frustration, he finally got his goal, which is what he lives and thrives on. And then the celebration, and there's Weston McKennie with Cristiano Ronaldo's arm around his shoulder after the celebration. And I tweeted out and I said, life moves pretty fast. And it does. I mean, this is wonderful for him, which gets us into the question of, and I know producer Alex wanted us to ask and maybe answer this question. Is Cristiano Ronaldo, the best club player that an American player has ever played with? And I started to think about this, and yes, you can definitely make the case. And, you can get all technical and not technical. I mean, the reality is that there are American players who played with Pele. Shep Messing played with Pele, okay? Or American players that played with Cruyff back in the NASL, or played with George Best, or played with Lothar Matthäus, or whoever else it is. But, Cristiano Ronaldo, Pele's probably the one that you can make an argument for. So, but, people are going to downplay that because it was the NASL, because of the United States. I mean, I can definitely make a case. Cristiano Ronaldo is going to go down as arguably the best player ever to play the game. And that Weston McKennie is there celebrating goals with him, passing the ball to him, playing on the same team. That's wonderful. It's not just wonderful for his development, but it's wonderful for the image, and it's wonderful for the perception of American soccer.
Yeah, the one thing I'll say is I continue to read nothing but good things in the Barcelona press about Conrad de la Fuente, and it sounds like he is going to play some this season. So when he gets on the field alongside Messi, we'll be able to have this debate. and it'll just be a launching pad for another Messi versus Ronaldo debate.
Well, these are wonderful days, as you mentioned. A lot of American connections and things to feel excited about, things to have hope for, and things to feel proud about, which transitions us perfectly into Gio Reyna. This shouldn't come as a surprise that he was a starter on day one for Borussia Dortmund, because we had kind of seen this coming. He's been groomed for it. He's been playing. There's obviously a relationship both on and off the field with Erling Haaland. And not only did he start, but he scoring the first goal for Borussia Dortmund in this season. He looked great. And once again, providing hope and promise and optimism for him as an individual player, but also as it relates to the U.S. men's national team. First off, just what did you think of the performance? And as I said, it shouldn't be surprising necessarily, but also where he played and how that may or may not fit in going forward with Greg Berhalter and company when it comes to the national team.
Well, the interesting thing for me is this goal-scoring dimension to his game, because he was impressive last season, but more as a provider, as a facilitator. He had 1 goal in 18 games in all competitions last season. It was that incredible long-distance strike against Werder Bremen in the German Cup. And he's come out this season. He scored a bunch of goals in the preseason. He scored in that cup match against Duisburg, and then he scores here. So it looks like he's going to be a player who, in addition to all his other qualities, is actually going to be a pretty regular goal scorer as well. So, boy, I mean, adding that to everything else he brings to the table, he's going to be a difficult player to keep out of the lineup. And, we'll see. I mean, Royce came on for him, and once Royce is 100% fit, you'd have to figure he's somebody that has to start, and Sancho has to start, and Haaland as well. So you do start running out of spots up there, but maybe Lucien Favre can get creative with the formation and try to get all 4 of them in there: Reyna, Sancho, Haaland, and Royce. So
these are good problems to have, by the way.
Sure.
So we'll save the Reyna stuff for a little bit later in the show as it relates to the national team. But as it relates to what is going on right now, you mentioned something that's important, and it does apply also to even to someone like Weston McKennie. There's a lot of competition, and players that are either coming in, players that are coming back from injury, players that are going to challenge, and it applies to him, it applies to Christian Pulisic, it applies to all of these players, and that's a good thing. Competition is a good thing, and the way that these teams look now may look very, very different 6 months from now or a year from now. But that they are being given these opportunities, that they are on the radar when it comes to these teams and these coaches are good things. Anything else you want to say about Gio Reyna?
Well, first of all, just to correct myself, because they made 2 substitutions at the same time. Technically, Royce came on for Sancho, and Julian Brandt came on for Gio Reyna. But you get the point.
I get the point.
Just big picture. I don't know if you want to transition to big picture Bundesliga and Serie A.
Yeah, let's. But I do want to mention just some other Americans when it comes to them playing. And look, this might be a good time to mention Sergiño Dest because the rumors are that he is going to Bayern Munich. So in this list of teams that we've been doing over the past couple of weeks, when it comes to what Greg Berhalter and what we are going to have on the books, don't add because we still have players when it comes to Bayern Munich. But if this ends up being where Sergiño Dest does go to Bayern Munich, and by the way, another one there that will be facing stiff competition when it comes to actually getting into that 11 of what is arguably the best team in the world right now, and they showed it right off the bat coming out and just saying they not even missing a beat. Then you had Josh Sargent playing with the start, Brooks, Tyler Adams. So these are all good things. And at the start of all of these types of seasons, from an American perspective right now, these are all positives. But you and I have been around a long time, and as I said, the way it looks at the beginning of the season may look very, very different. We get injuries, we get coaching changes, we get form, we get whatever. And by the way, we're still in 2020. And who knows what 2020 is going to throw at us going forward. But a lot of really, really positive things when it comes to American players, including the potential transfer of Sergiño Dest to, I said, arguably the best team in the world, which is Bayern Munich.
Well, and if I told you we'd be celebrating a great weekend for Americans in Europe, and it'd be a weekend where Christian Pulisic didn't even play because he's injured, because, he's considered the standard bearer of this whole generation, but it just speaks to the depth now. And there's lots of other guys to keep track of as well. So it's, it's exciting times for sure.
Okay, so let's transition a little bit into just other stuff that's going on. And I mentioned Bayern Munich. We covered the Bundesliga for a number of years. It's a really, really interesting league, and I learned a whole lot, not just about the Bundesliga, but about Germany. And it was really interesting to delve into it. And we wish our colleagues over there at ESPN all the luck as they have taken over that property. Is it a good thing or a bad thing that Bayern Munich came out and in their very first game just completely annihilated Schalke 8-0? I mean, I saw a tweet from Gary Lineker, who's a pundit, a very famous pundit, and I doubt he watches a lot of Bundesliga, but obviously he was watching this game, and a very facetious and sarcastic type of way of saying it's basically over. And that was a reaction of a lot of people. It's like, is it a good thing or is it a bad thing? What just happened?
Yeah, it's interesting that the Bundesliga and Serie A kicked off this weekend. Both those leagues are dealing with the same issue. Juventus having won 9 in a row and Bayern having won 8 in a row. And unless you're a fan of those two teams, if you care about those leagues, you are concerned by that and you're sort of thirsting for somebody else to win it. And so you go into each season kind of trying to talk yourself into somebody else being able to challenge them. So to take Germany first, I'll say this. 2 seasons ago, Dortmund topped the table for much of the campaign. Bayern ended up pipping them in the end, but it came down to the very last round. And all of us came away from that feeling like it was sort of trending Dortmund's way. Dortmund then went on, had a very good summer, while Bayern were looking very shaky going into the next campaign with Niko Kovac, and a bunch of people were actually picking Dortmund to win it. And then lo and behold, Bayern get rid of Kovac. They bring in Hansi Flick. They take off. They end up winning the league by 13 points. They win the treble, and they pick up Leroy Sané, pick up where they left off this season, 8-0 over Schalke. And as you mentioned, there's a sense that they've completely reasserted their dominance there, and we're back to thinking that this is a formality, and that little Dortmund moment is gone. I will say, of course, I think Bayern are going to win the Bundesliga. They would be my pick. You'd be a fool not to, if you were a betting man, to not put your money on Bayern. But Dortmund are sneaky loaded this season as well. The fact that they were able to hold on to Sancho for another season, because under normal circumstances with no pandemic, somebody would have met their asking price for Sancho this offseason. I'm sure the way they sort of mapped it out, they envisioned probably losing Sancho this summer. And then as it turned out, because of the pandemic, nobody wanted to pay their asking price. So they decided, well, we're not going to sell him on the cheap. We'll hold on to him for another season. So lo and behold, they have Sancho for another season. They have Haaland for a full season. Royce, as I mentioned, if he can ever get fit, the emergence of Gio Reyna, and then guys like Julian Brandt and Thorgan Hazard, they add Jude Bellingham to that midfield. Emre Can for a full season, who looks like he's going to play more at the back rather than the midfield, which I'm fine with. Boy, all the pieces are there. If Dortmund can ever not do Dortmund stuff and blow leads and drop points that they shouldn't drop, they might be able to run roughshod over that league too and make this more interesting than most people expect. Is that just wishful thinking on my part?
Come on, Mosse. Fool me once. Fool me once. Come on, man. I mean, I've seen this before. We've all seen this before, and everybody gets excited. And this is potentially it. And they're really stocked, and they got great depth. And this is where it's at. And then, like you said, it never happens. So I am a scarred and scorned lover, and I don't want to get hurt again. I have a fragile heart right now when it comes to the Bundesliga.
No, listen, I hear you. I mean, Leroy Sané, if he can stay fit, he is going to be an incredible signing for them. They're actually in better shape at the back than they were at the end of last season because Nicolas Sula is now completely healthy. Same with Lucas Hernandez. They did lose Thiago, and Alaba seems unsettled over negotiations for a new contract. But nevertheless, I mean, Bayern are still Bayern. And of course, I think they're going to win the Bundesliga. I just think Dortmund could be very good as well.
All right, well, let's finish up this segment here before we move on to an EPL segment with some La Liga stuff that's going on there. All sorts of talk when it comes to goal scorers, what's going to happen. And, La Liga, anytime you talk about La Liga, obviously you're going to talk about Real Madrid and Barcelona. Real Madrid looked, shall we say, rusty at this point. And they need someone to score, and they need somebody up top.
Yeah, listen, this was the same game I watched 7 or 8 times after the restart last season. The only difference was you didn't have that Sergio Ramos penalty to turn it from a 0-0 to a 1-0. So they begin their campaign with a 0-0 draw away to Real Sociedad. And yet, there's just not a lot of goals in that lineup if it's not Benzema scoring. Now, they're counting on Hazard having this bounce-back campaign and also Asensio being fit for the full season. Neither one of those two played. Which in Hazard's case, he's not fit right now, which gets his second season off to a weird start for him. But so that is the big issue there right now. The only move they made, they didn't sign anybody, but they did bring Martin Odegaard back from loan. He had been with Real Sociedad, so he faced his former team this past weekend, and he slotted right into the starting lineup. I thought played well. I'm a big fan of it. It's crazy that Norway have two talents like Haaland and Odegaard to build around the next few years. So he's going to be a very good addition in the midfield, but it doesn't address that goal scoring problem, which is why it's kind of intriguing that you now hear that Edinson Cavani is being offered to Real Madrid. Cavani is a guy who didn't re-sign with PSG. He's swatted away all of their offers so far from the likes of Benfica, but now it's getting close enough to the end of the transfer window that he's starting to get a little nervous, and now his agent is starting to offer him around, including you here to Real Madrid. And to me, it is something to think about because he's better than Jovic, who has been a disaster, and so Cavani could give him a guy behind Benzema that can come in and score some goals. So that one's intriguing. And then on the topic of Uruguayan strikers, we did have this big Luis Suarez news today. He finally extricated himself from Barcelona. He had 1 year left on his deal. He was looking to rescind his contract, but he still wanted to make all the money that was owed to him this season. And so they sort of met him halfway. They're going to pay him some of the money. And so Luis Suarez is out there now. And all signs point to him signing with Atletico Madrid. At one point, we thought Juventus. He did pass that language test, but it turns out it's going to take too long for him to get an Italian passport for him to sign with Juventus. So Juventus are going to go for Edin Dzeko instead. And it sounds like Suarez is going to go to Atletico Madrid, which is absolutely fascinating that Barcelona would let him go to a direct rival like that. But we'll see. It sounds like that's the way things are going to go.
Why doesn't Suarez just go to Real Madrid, or is that a bridge too far? That's too
that is a bridge too far. Yeah.
All right. Well, we'll see where everybody lands and where they are sitting ultimately when the music stops of the transfer window. But I'm sure there's plenty of a few more songs to go before ultimately we see how it all ends up. All right. Let me just finish it up by reiterating the fact that it was so wonderful to see Weston McKennie. The history of Americans in Serie A are few. And look, when it comes to a Weston McKennie or a Michael Bradley, they are much better players than I ever was. And they have gone and taken this incredible pathway and this unique pathway to have this experience in Serie A. And they are doing it at a completely different level in terms of the clubs that they went to, whether it's Roma with Michael Bradley or Juventus, obviously, when it comes to Weston McKennie. And I couldn't be happier for them. I played in a different time, literally in a different century, and certainly for a very, very small club. But I'm so happy that there are more Americans, and I hope that there are more Americans in the future that get that experience playing in Serie A and living and working in Italy. I hope he's not the last. All right, as I said, when we come back in the next segment, we'll be diving into all the EPL action and all of the drama and theater that EPL, look, let's be honest, gives us on a continual basis, and there was plenty of it over the last week. Don't go away. EPL coming up next in the next segment. Moving on. All right, we're back with an EPL review segment. So much going on in the EPL, and look, we kid and we tease our good friend Alex Dowd, who, for those that maybe have missed it, is a avid Chelsea supporter. He's not going to talk again this week because his Chelsea team struggled. I mean, look, in a game where there's a red card, it's always going to change a game. And certainly there's no shame in losing to Liverpool, which ultimately they did 2-0. But the Chelsea of 2020, 2021 was something, and still is something, that we have high expectations for. And a lot of that is relative to the big names that have come in, whether it's Werner or Havertz, or whether it's just the amount of money that they have spent. And as I said, there's no shame in losing to Liverpool, but when you prop yourself up and you position yourself as a possible challenger to Liverpool, this was not a good result. I guess I'll start there, Mosse. And my question to you, when it comes to Liverpool, it's difficult just in normal circumstances to repeat, especially when you have a historic type of year and the amount of points. Do you think that this Liverpool is better, and we'll talk about the additions, and I'm sure you will hit upon the additions or addition when it comes to Liverpool. And two, are we already seeing a problem when it comes to Chelsea, or does this need time in order to really come to fruition?
Well, I texted you that the football gods had really done us a nice favor this weekend because it's so perfect that Chelsea played Liverpool. The rivalry between these two teams is red hot right now. You can tell from talking to friends of mine that are fans of each team. There's a lot of antipathy there. Began late last season when Lampard criticized Liverpool for being arrogant in the way they celebrated a victory late in the season over Chelsea. And people like our colleague Zach Kenworthy, big Liverpool fan, really took offense to that. He's had a bug up his ass about Frank Lampard ever since. And then Klopp with his barbs about all of Chelsea spending. And then Liverpool go out and spend the money they did this past week. So Chelsea fans accuse him of being a hypocrite. So I felt like the backdrop to this game was actually more interesting than the game itself ended up being. Why don't we start there first before we dig into the match? What do you make of all this back and forth? Does Klopp have a right to criticize clubs like Chelsea for the way they spend? Is he being a hypocrite because Liverpool have thrown a fair amount of money around as well since he took charge? What do you make of this whole back and forth?
Yes, he's being a hypocrite, but I completely understand what he is doing. Part of his job, Klopp has not built himself up, nor I guess is he, at least on the surface, in the way that Mourinho or others have built themselves and even Sir Alex, as master manipulators, as wonderful string pullers of emotion and public perception. Klopp has been much more, I guess for lack of a better word, or at least he's been perceived as much more organic, and that's not something that he does. So that he has kind of added this to his repertoire, I actually think is a good thing, because the manipulation and the way that you deal with the press and the strategic way in which you plant seeds and say things, I think is part of being a coach. And certainly when you're the coach of one of the great teams in the world, you have to pick and choose your moments. And is he in danger of looking like he is, crying or whining, and has no real, and shouldn't be able to stand on that, given what you said of what Liverpool is? No, I don't think so yet. But it is at times maybe a little rich when it comes from it. I'm not saying that he shouldn't do it, but look, Liverpool have spent plenty of money, and if Klopp wants to go coach a team in the mid or lower level and really kind of get his bona fides of coaching a team up, fine, he can go over there and do that. But until that time, I think he does need to recognize, and he does, believe me, he does, that he is in charge and has been given a very fine and expensive machine to be able to race.
And I will say on the game, I know Chelsea can plausibly point to the Christensen red card as having been the determinant factor in this game, because up until that point, although Liverpool had more of the ball, more of the impetus, they hadn't created that many clear chances. And Chelsea were looking dangerous on the counter with Werner finding space down that left wing. And by the way, I was very impressed with Timo Werner's performance. I know there was some debate about that. There were a couple of one-on-one duels with Fabinho in the first half that Fabinho got the better of him, and people were holding that against Werner. But still, all the running he does, all the danger he creates, he earns that penalty in the second half. So I thought overall very positive for him. I thought he was the one bright spot. But so Lampard can plausibly say, look, up until the red card, our game plan was working and the game was kind of evenish. And then the red card completely changed the game. And frankly, the second half, that felt like an offense-defense scrimmage at times for Liverpool. It was just like a training session, the way they were knocking the ball around. But nevertheless, I thought from the start, that felt like a very confident Liverpool performance, a team that wanted to make a statement that, look, hey, everybody's making a fuss about all these other teams, but we're still here. We're still Liverpool. We're still the team to beat. I even thought the first 40 some odd minutes before the red card, it was just impressive the way they controlled the game and were knocking it around. So, yeah, I think it's a very nice statement win for Liverpool. I'm sorry, you want to?
No, I just when it comes to red cards, yes, I mean, red cards change games. It's one thing if it's a red card where it's by the letter of the law, or it's a controversial one, or there's a problem. But Liverpool put themselves in the position to be able to have that red card change the game. And as you mentioned, there's another thing if they were just completely under attack and they weren't even in the game or anything like that. So yes, it did change the game. And yes, from a Chelsea perspective, you're going to fall back on that and say yes, but it really would have been interesting to see how it played out had it been 11-on-11. But yeah, I mean, come on.
That penalty came about because of a wonderful ball by Jordan Henderson,
exactly.
who I thought was maybe the best player on the field in the first. Maybe he should have won Player of the Year last season. But nevertheless, he has to come off at halftime, and then they bring on Thiago, who and listen, I think the NBC guys went a little bit overboard. It was just like this Thiago love fest. They showed him at one point in the first half sitting on the bench looking like any other player would look if you showed him on the bench. And Lee Dixon made a big point of, look at how relaxed he is. And that's what really sets him apart from other players. He's so relaxed. And then after he came on, every 5-yard square pass was like, oh, look at the way he caresses the ball. And they, the truth is he made an incredibly boneheaded play in committing that penalty on Werner and gave Chelsea a lifeline out of nothing.
Quiet, Mosse. Stop. Don't. You're killing the narrative.
And they barely mentioned that. But no, he's a wonderful player. He's going to be a wonderful signing, not just from the standpoint of just freshening things up, but also I think tactically, you saw in that Community Shield against Arsenal, you saw it a little bit in this game. Teams are going to sit back against Liverpool now. They've learned not to give guys like Mane and Salah so much space to operate, and so they're going to force Liverpool to kind of break them down. And having a midfielder of Thiago's ilk, I think, is really going to help in that regard. He is going to add another dimension to that midfield, so that's a great signing. And I also think Diogo Jota is a terrific signing as well. I know the money they ended up paying got pretty close to the Werner deal, so people say, well, why not sign Timo Werner? Well, because the role that Jota is going to play is one that Werner was overqualified for and one that he wasn't going to be satisfied with. Liverpool, as we talked about, they're walking a little bit of a tightrope here because that front three is so settled and have had so much success and they fit so well together and they're going to be difficult to dislodge. You're looking for a guy who's good enough to play for Liverpool, but who is going to be okay being mostly a backup this season. And Jota kind of hits that sweet spot in a way that I think Werner didn't. And so to me, it's a move that makes perfect sense. And so to me, they've made two excellent signings in the last week. They've really spruced up that squad. And with this performance and the moves they made, I think they really re-established themselves as, clearly the team to beat. And I don't know if there was any doubt about that, but if there was, to me, I feel pretty good about saying that they're the team to beat again.
I mean, you don't need to overhaul it, obviously. You just need to tweak it here or there. And when you can tweak with a Thiago, I mean, that's pretty good. But I will say to your point about showing on the bench and that, the whole body language thing is something that we do in sports and especially in sports television. We love to attach meaning to, there's a famous Bobby Knight reaction to what a game face is and what a game face isn't, and a lot of that is true. I try not to read too much into how people react, or if it's obvious and a player is screaming and yelling at a coach or flipping them off or something, then you got to talk about it. But the way that a player sits or doesn't sit, or the way the player stands or doesn't stand, I think it's really, really difficult to attach meaning to something like that in the context of sports. Before we leave these two teams, Kepa, I mean, we've seen goalkeepers melt down over the years, and we've seen goalkeepers where at some point it doesn't have anything to do with their physical abilities. And look, this is the most expensive goalkeeper in the world, and that it's much more between the ears than any actual physical limitation that he may or may not have right now. Are we seeing this? Is this concerning to you? And more importantly, I guess, to Alex Dowd and company when it comes to Chelsea?
Well, we won't know about Alex Dowd because he refuses to chime in on this podcast. But I'll say this on this topic of Liverpool and Chelsea spending money. Both those clubs broke the bank for goalkeepers in the same summer. Liverpool signed Alisson for what at the time was the highest transfer fee ever paid for a goalkeeper. And then Chelsea came right afterwards and signed Kepa. And you look at the way those two keepers have panned out, and it was illustrated in that game. Alisson stops a penalty from Jorginho, while Kepa makes a mistake he makes in the second goal. So, I mean, it's a player. I think it was Lee Dixon, to give him credit on this. He said, if you're a midfielder and your confidence is shot, you can kind of hide it and just play it safe and sort of, if you're a goalkeeper, there's nowhere to hide. If you have a goalkeeper whose confidence is shot, it's it's going to show itself. It's going to be a major, major problem, and it is right now for Chelsea.
Well, all of this means, and we'll move on from this, all of this means, and I think is pointing to the fact that Chelsea need a superhero. And there is only one person that can fit that role, and that is that all of Chelsea's ills, whatever they may or may not be, can be fixed by the return of Christian Pulisic. We don't know when that's going to happen, and maybe Christian should stay out a few more for a few more weeks here because he continues to be injured, and we've talked about this time and time again. Don't know when he's ultimately going to come riding in as the cavalry and finish this, but it's not good for Christian Pulisic because it's just yet another period of injury, and we've said time and time again that he just can't have any type of consistency when it comes to being healthy. So anything else before we move on to some other stuff, Mosse?
No, that's it on that game.
All right. The other big news when it comes to the EPL and certainly when it comes to signings is the Bale back to Tottenham situation. And right now, correct me if I'm wrong, Mosse, it's a loan is what we're talking about here as opposed to a sale. The saga of Bale at Real Madrid, 7 years, I think. I always looked at it as a success. Look, I know he wasn't a consistent starter, but when he was there, he was phenomenal. That he at times has looked like, once again, body language, that he is pouting. Didn't really change the fact that I still look at it as a success. I guess first off, do you look at it as a success? And him returning to Spurs, what are they ultimately getting? And does this make I guess that's a dumb question. Does it make them better? Unless you feel that he's completely shot and done, does this make them better?
Listen, I've said this about Gareth Bale. Thinking the Madrid median fans have been unfair to him is the correct macro view of that situation when you look at his 7 years there. But over the past 12 months, Bale has given off a serious whiff of washed upness. And the British media, because they view everything through the prism of the Madrid median fans being unfair to him, they've kind of tended to ignore that or attribute it to him just being in this terrible environment that's weighing him down. And of course, when you take him out of there and put him somewhere where he's happy and loved, he's going to flip that switch and become this great player again. We'll see. I'm not so sure. But listen, I'm glad he made this move because I've said this before. I'll say it again. The whole hoarding of players. As a neutral fan of the game, it's more interesting having Gareth Bale playing week in, week out for Tottenham or James Rodriguez, who, by the way, is off to a phenomenal start with Everton, playing week in, week out for them, than sitting at the end of the bench for Real Madrid. I'm glad that these two guys were able to extricate themselves from that situation and go somewhere where they're actually going to play and we're going to see what they have left in the tank. And I guess the James example would be encouraging if you're a Spurs fan because that's another guy that Real Madrid had absolutely no use for, and look at what he's doing with Everton. So perhaps Tottenham and Mourinho can catch lightning in the bottle with Bale as well.
Relative to what I said at the beginning of the podcast about the Spurs doc, this makes sense completely, okay? Because number one, Mourinho is about himself and the power and the leverage of that name. And, Bale has already said that talking with Mourinho, this is part of what has enabled this to happen. So that's the good part of it. The second part is not so good in that it reflects exactly what I said about this Spurs team, in that they are milquetoast, they are soft, and look, they scored plenty of goals, and Son is scoring goals at will, and obviously. Harry Kane is wonderful. So do they need him? Yeah, you can always use a goal scorer and somebody who is dynamic, but he just kind of, I'm talking about Bale right now. He is a Spurs type of player in that, is he really going to run through a wall for you? I don't know, but I do think that it makes them better. And it is something that I will watch. How he is used or when he is used, I don't know, but it's going to be fun to see what they ultimately look like. What else when it comes to EPL is standing out to you, Mosse?
Well, I mentioned Everton. They beat West Brom 5-2, so they're looking good. They're looking fun, really. And I'm already looking ahead to those Merseyside derbies with Liverpool and Everton. Those could actually be entertaining this season. And then the other thing would be Manchester United, who lose to Crystal Palace. And United, to me, are a case of how an underwhelming transfer window can really undercut the momentum of a club, because they had such a good second half of last season. And we all felt like maybe they had turned a corner and it was really something to build on. But it was all under the presumption that they were going to go out and make some moves during this window and plug some of the holes they still had. And instead, the only player they've signed is Van de Beek, who's a very good player. He scored a nice goal this past weekend, but wasn't really filling a need. With Bruno Fernandes and Paul Pogba there, I felt like that's a bit of a luxury signing. On the other hand, they have some clear holes at the back, at center back, left back. They probably could even use like a better center forward than Ighalo. And yet they haven't addressed any of that. Now there's 2 weeks left and the fans are getting antsy. And some of that negativity that they had kind of, you felt like the second half of last season, the dark clouds had kind of lifted. And now because of this frustrating inactivity in the transfer market, the fans are grumbling again. And some of that negativity is coming back with United. So it's going to be interesting to see how the next 2 weeks go.
Are we being disrespectful in that if you look at the actual table, and I know there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 teams that have won their first 2 games, and it should be said that Man City has yet to even play a game, but are we being disrespectful to Leicester sitting at the top of the EPL right now? Or are we? I mean, I don't know if anybody expects that to continue ultimately when this all gets shaken out, or are we being disrespectful? And this probably shows you how far Arsenal has come down. Are we being disrespectful to Arsenal by not mentioning them right off the top?
No, I mean, in the case of Leicester, again, if you had offered Leicester at the start of last season 5th place, they would have happily taken it. But it's the way that it played out. They had such a good first half of the campaign and then kind of fell apart in the second half. They won just 4 of their last 17 Premier League games. And so it left a really bad taste. And so you wondered how they were going to mentally bounce back from that. And so far, very well. I mean, that is still a very, very talented team. And so, give them credit. So far, so good for them. And Arsenal, I think people have spoken plenty about them under Arteta. And I mean, the consensus is that they are heading in the right direction. They have the right manager now there. So I don't think either of those clubs are like legitimate contenders to win the title. So that's why we're not going crazy over them being at the very top of the table now. But both good teams, absolutely.
So then, you're not buying Crystal Palace to win the title either? Also at undefeated 2-0? No. Okay, it's not happening with them. Okay, that's fine. Anything else stick out to you when it comes to the EPL, Mosse?
No, that's it.
All right. As Mosse said, there's plenty to come and plenty of twists and turns. And while you look at the table, it doesn't necessarily mirror what the reality is when it comes to
we neglected to mention this, but Tottenham did make another signing, a very talented young Spanish left back, Sergio Reguilon, and his signing did spawn Tim Sherwood, one of the great internet clips. I think I sent this to you guys. I have never seen Premier League snobbery so encapsulated in like a 15-second clip. I mean, we don't have to go down that vortex this week, but I mean that for people that don't know, Google Tim Sherwood and Reguilon. That is
you can't do that without paying it off, Mosse. I mean, give the people what they want. It's legend. It will be legendary. I think it already is legendary. But explain to the people what you were talking about here.
So, in addition to Gareth Bale, Spurs acquired another player from Real Madrid, Sergio Reguilon. He's a very talented young left back.
Where did he play, Mosse? Where is he coming from?
Well, Real Madrid are his parent club. But he played for Sevilla last season. So 2 seasons ago, he emerged as a starter for Real Madrid. He put Marcelo.
Hold on a second. Where is Real Madrid and Sevilla? What teams?
Spain.
They play in Spain. Would that be the first division or lower division?
Correct.
Just checking. I just want to make sure.
So 2 seasons ago, he emerged as a starter for Real Madrid. He put Marcelo on the bench. Then Zidane came along. Zidane inexplicably doesn't rate him, so he loaned him out to Sevilla. But he did very well there, helped them win the Europa League. He's been capped for Spain. Anybody that follows football the last couple of years knows this is one of the best young left backs in the world, and it's a very good signing for Spurs to get him. And so former Tottenham manager Tim Sherwood was asked to comment on it this week, and I mean, it was just the most dismissive, well, he hasn't played in the Premier League yet, so how do we know this guy's any good? I mean, it's all fine and good to be signing players from these clubs like Real Madrid, but you don't know until he actually steps foot in the Premier League if this guy's actually a good player. I mean, it was just – Tim Sherwood, by the way, who, the backstory there is he played for Blackburn, and Blackburn are a club that famously in the summer of 1995 thought about signing a young French midfielder named Zinedine Zidane and didn't because A, they weren't sure how he would adapt to the Premier League, and B, they felt like they didn't need Zidane because they already had Tim Sherwood. So, and that story has been told many times over the last 25 years. So if you're Tim Sherwood and you're sort of intertwined in probably the most infamous, ridiculous English club overthinking kind of guy adapt to the Premier League story ever, you'd think you'd have a little bit more self-awareness. And yet, boy, he just doubles down on that line of thinking every time he opens his mouth. It's really extraordinary.
Yeah, I mean, look, not to defend him, and we'll finish it up here, but the reality is that leagues do have identities and leagues do have styles. I think you can agree with that, Mosse, that and different ones and unique ones, and the ability to adapt and to adjust for a player is crucial to his or her success when they come from a different league and a different country and a different culture and maybe even a very different style of play. But the old tried and true type of, it's a much more physical league when it comes to the EPL. I can see where you could think that and where there are certain examples that you could point to, but I think it is very, very limited moments when a player comes to the EPL and isn't able to deal with or adjust to the physical nature of the league. And I think it's also, it paints the EPL as almost Neanderthal or caveman-esque type of style. And I think it downplays the quality that exists in the EPL when you fall back on the physical nature of the EPL. While that may have been the case in the past, I don't think that it is the case anymore. And by the way, the irony of that is that maybe the influx of international players and the change when it comes to the composition or the makeup of the teams has maybe moved it away from that. But we'll see if a left back who is, as you said, widely considered to be one of the great left backs in the world, who has played at a high level and certainly played for teams and in a league that is oftentimes looked at as even the highest level, can make that adjustment and has the ability to deal with somebody pushing or pulling or kicking or doing whatever it is that Tim Sherwood or anybody else thinks is not done anywhere else. All right, we will take another quick break here. And when we come back, we will dive into the Ask Alexi segment of our podcast. So don't go away. Moving on. All right, we're back, and it's time for the Ask Alexi segment. Where you use that hashtag Ask Alexi out there, or you can use hashtag Ask Mosse. You can ask either one of us, but you use it out there on all the different platforms, whether it's Twitter or Facebook or Instagram or anything else out there, to get us the message, to get us your question, your comment, or your concern. And we pick a few each week, and we read them off as we are about to do. Mosse, what did the folks want to know this week?
First up, at Shane O'Mac 8. If Nagbe is as good as you say, why hasn't a European club come in for him?
Oh, that is a good question. All right, so first off, you're assuming that nobody has ever kicked the tires or has inquired about Darlington Nagbe, and I would say that that's wrong. Okay, there's certainly teams out there that have made inquiries about him. Now, his attitude that is well documented when it comes to the national team is, I think, and for those that don't know, Darlington Nagbe, who I feel is the most technically gifted American player playing the game today, and I still feel that. He has been very public about the fact that he does not want to play for the U.S. men's national team. And as I said, a lot of that is rooted in his desire to be grounded, I suppose literally, when it comes to the amount of travel that exists, that you're an additional travel that you have to do when it comes to the national team. While it saddens me, there's nothing I can do to change that. But I do think that this is a man who thinks about himself and thinks about his family and thinks about his moment in life and time in at times very different ways than other professionals do. And he is much more, I guess, content and satisfied with his position and lot in life the way it is, whether it was playing with Atlanta or anybody else, but I guess playing in Major League Soccer than others. And maybe that works to diffuse the possibilities and the opportunities out there when it comes to him. In that, why should I waste my time and effort? Because unless it is ideal and perfect, he's not even going to entertain it. I think that's where it comes into play. Right now he's injured. I mean, it's not as if he has a long Pulisic-esque type of history of injuries. So he is durable. As I said, I think he is talented. I think that Darlington Nagbe could play at any team in the world. Darlington Nagbe could be doing exactly, and I think even more than, let's say, who we've talked about already on this podcast, a Weston McKennie. And this gets into the perception type of situation. That he plays in Major League Soccer probably works against him in terms of opportunities. And that's not me making excuses. That's just me giving you the reality of what is going on. When I was watching Weston McKennie, who I think is a very good player, maybe potentially he can be great. But when I was watching him play for one of the great teams this past weekend in Juventus, playing in Serie A, and what he was doing, I thought to myself, how many players that exist right now in MLS could be doing not just the exact same thing, but even better? And maybe that's sacrilege to even think or to say, but I think that there's plenty of players that are playing right now in Major League Soccer that, if given that opportunity, would be able to do it. And either they're not getting the opportunity because of the league that they play in and the perception that people have of that league, or they just haven't had the different timing or the circumstances or a million different things that play into it. All of that is to say, Shane O'Mac, I just don't think that the right situation has come about. And I think the specific person that we are talking about here in Darlington Nagbe, he is so unique in the way that he thinks about things that I think a lot of teams will just move on and go to somebody else that's maybe much more open to a possibility when it comes to it. And just because somebody is playing at a super club doesn't mean that there is not a equal or even a better that may be playing someplace that you just don't consider to be of quality. I mean, is that a diamond in the rough? Maybe, but and that's ultimately, and I know I'm getting much more big picture here, but that's ultimately the challenge of Major League Soccer, is to change that perception, is to offer that credibility when it comes to the talent that I believe we have, that I believe that can play in the best clubs and in the best leagues around the world, if given that opportunity. Okay.
Well, Nagbe did, just to finish this conversation off, did almost go to Celtic back in, I think it was after the 2016 MLS season. And then it was reported that he was going to go, and then the deal between Portland and Celtic collapsed at the last minute. And actually, that set off an interesting debate back then, a debate that was reignited recently by Matt Doyle as to whether an MLS player at this point leaving to go to Scotland is kind of selling itself short. Is that a step up? Even if it's to go to a club like Celtic.
It's a step down. What are you talking about? He's too good for Celtic. Are you kidding me? Come on.
Yeah, I mean and Mark McKenzie, Philadelphia Union, has been linked with Celtic recently, so people have been sort of examining that question. And
the only reason that you would do it, because it is a step down, but the only reason that you would do it is to use it as that stepping stone, because there is much more legitimacy and credibility given to somebody coming from Celtic to that next move than there is if you're coming from Portland or someplace else in Major League Soccer. So strategically, it may be a smart move, but don't tell me that it's a step up in terms of the quality. And as I said before, someone like Darlington Nagbe, he's too good for Celtic. They don't deserve him.
Next
All right,
up,
what else, Mosse?
at Pedro Navas 820. Opinion on Gio Reyna,
Yep.
picturing himself as the number 10 instead of Pulisic. I feel competition is good. What Pedro Navas is alluding to was in an interview with our good friend Grant Wall. Grant asked Gio what role he envisions playing in the national team, and Gio sort of suggested that maybe as a number 10 playing directly in front of McKennie and Adams. And because I guess Pulisic was just handed the number 10 at Chelsea, people I guess now view him as a quote unquote number 10. I really don't. But so I guess Pedro Navas is suggesting that there might be some competition there between Pulisic and Reyna. I prefer Pulisic out on the wing, and so to me they're completely compatible. But I mean, do you even accept the premise of this question that there's somehow some competition there in the context of the U.S. team between those two?
Okay, so Gio Reyna is 17 years old, okay? We've already anointed him and basically have not penned him in now starting for the U.S. men's national team. I'm not saying that isn't appropriate, but we still haven't seen what Gio Reyna looks like from a U.S. men's national team perspective. And sometimes it can change drastically. Having said all of that, I am much more comfortable with 17-year-old, inexperienced from a national team perspective, Gio Reyna starting in the middle for the U.S. men's national team than Christian Pulisic, okay? But what that does is then, and you're absolutely right that competition is good. And Greg Berhalter is going to have a bunch of choices to make. Because if you agree right now with my premise that Gio Reyna should be starting in the middle, let's just say everybody's healthy. And that's a big if. Let's just say everybody's healthy. You have Josie Altidore right now, who still, as long as he is healthy, and that's not necessarily a good thing, but that's who you're going to start up top. You know, what Gyasi Zardes is doing is great, but still, I think ultimately, if Josie Altidore is healthy, you're starting him up top. Then, as I said before, Gio Reyna right underneath him, and now you're looking at wings, and Christian Pulisic, put him in the best position to succeed. And obviously the best position to succeed with the U.S. men's national team. I still think it's out there on that left where he does the most damage, where he can do one-on-one. I think when it gets more cluttered and more chaotic inside in the middle, I think he runs out of ideas. But that also forces the other question is, okay, if you put Christian Pulisic out on the left, does Jordan Morris come into your thinking? And if he does, where does he go? Does he go out on the right? Or is it do you start Jordan Morris over a Christian Pulisic on the left? I know that's sacrilege to say that possibly Christian Pulisic can't start. These are all champagne problems, as Tata Martino would say. These are all wonderful, wonderful things. I love the fact that even at 17 years old, Gio Reyna has the confidence in himself and that beautiful arrogance to say, yeah, this is my position. This is where I'm going to play. And that this is where I want to play. I love that this generation is able to articulate and express where they play, because let's be honest, we have raised a generation of tweeners in the fact that so many American players, while they may be talented and technically gifted, I have no idea what position they actually play. So that the fact that one of the great young players that is emerging right now has the wherewithal and the understanding to be able to say, this is where I play. This is my position. I love that. I love that that's happening. Doesn't necessarily mean it's going to happen when it comes to the national team, but I love that he is doing that, and I have no problem with him in that position.
And we'll end on this. At Kansas Chap, what's something you'd like MLS to bring back from the OG days?
The OG days. Well, I'm on record, and I will repeat saying that I thought that the 35-yard penalties, shootouts, if you will, literal shootouts, were great. And I would love to see those brought back. I would love to see, and for those that don't know, you start the ball at 35 yards. You have 5 seconds before you have to have taken the shot. And I think it much more fairly replicates and represents what the game is, in that there is dribbling involved, there are angles involved, there is motion involved, the goalkeeper can come out, you don't have to worry about staying on the line and all that kind of stuff. And then obviously you shoot. I think it's a much fairer representation, and therefore a much fairer way of deciding a game than traditional kicks from the spot and penalty kicks when we're talking about the game. So I would love to see that. And as we all know, it wasn't necessarily MLS that came up with this, because if you look back in the NASL, they used that. It is a very Americanized type of thing, and therefore it will, in many people's minds and eyes, be looked at askant because of the fact that it is such an American type of thing. But I think if you actually talked to people out there around the world, they would love it. And I think it would make for greater drama. I think, as I said, it would be fairer. And I would love to see that brought back in terms of OG things that existed. Anything pop out to you, Mosse?
I must say, I did like that OG shootout, and that's like my guilty pleasure, that, because that's a very inauthentic thing to say, but I would not be mad at all if they brought that back. I really got a kick out of those shootouts.
It was fun. It was, and look, there's strategy involved. And as I said, it's 5 seconds. You have 5 seconds to actually take the shot. So you could dribble up, then go around the goalkeeper, and the clock is ticking down, and you have to have made contact before that 5 seconds is out. So it doesn't have to go in the back of the net, or it doesn't have to cross the line before the 5 seconds. You just have to complete that shot. Your last touch has to happen before the 5 seconds. And there was all sorts of different strategies. And people would lift the ball up. People would chip the goalkeeper. People would dribble around the goalkeeper. People would start and go out and kind of serpentine in order to get a different angle. And that, for me, look, I'm not discounting the importance and the skill that's involved in taking a traditional penalty kick from the spot. But we all know that 80% of the time when that happens, a goal is scored. The ball goes in the back of the net. And I think that's the percentage. I have to look up what the percentage of successful attempts when it came to the 35-yard shootout, but I would venture to say that it's below 50%, I would say. So I think that's a good thing. I think, and as I said before, it mirrors the game much better than anything else. Mosse, anything else from Ask Alexi?
That's it.
All right. Well, as you know, you don't know because I'm telling you right now. Well, I will tell you, we have come to the end of the show. And as you do know, at the end of the show, each and every show, I give you my one for the road. I was thinking back, Mosse, about retirement. In my career, I retired twice. And so usually people retire once, but if you're me or a handful of others, including even Landon Donovan, you have multiple retirements. In what would have been 1999, I was 29 turning 30. So I was coming into a whole new decade of my life, into my 30s, and the century was coming to an end. We were coming into a whole new millennium. I was playing at the time in Kansas City for what then were the Kansas City Wizards. I was coming off of a horrible year. We were a horrible team. I had a great time in Kansas City, but we were a horrible team. I had spent basically the 90s and the last decade burning it hard at both ends, and taking advantage of every opportunity on and off the field that came my way. Not regretting it for a second. I'd do it all again. But when you burn it that hard for a long time, it can certainly take its toll. And I came to the realization at the end of the 99 season that I needed to stop. I didn't know for how long. And so therefore, while it ended up being a retirement, we ended up calling it a stepping away. I'll never forget sitting down with my agent and trying to figure out how we were going to frame this. Because all we knew was I wasn't going to play the next year. I needed to step away. And so we called it a stepping away. I was incredibly fortunate that I even had the opportunity to do something like that. As I said, I needed to kind of get back or rejuvenate both my body and my mind. I needed to get myself straight, as is the case often in these situations. There's a girl involved. I ended up chasing a girl. I drove cross country a couple of times with a buddy of mine. As I said, I chased the girl who ended up being my wife. I did television. I did a lot of different things that I wouldn't have been able to do had I continued playing. And I knew that I wasn't going to be any good to whatever team that I was playing for. Don't cry for Kansas City, because while in the moment it may have looked like I left them in the lurch, they actually used that spot to then go sign Miklos Molnar and then go on in the next season winning MLS Cup, which certainly I was happy for them, but I also said, wow, the year that I leave, they sign a great goal scorer and they go all the way to the promised land and win MLS Cup. But I was fine with my decision. It worked out with the girl. It worked out from a human perspective in that I came back as a much changed and better soccer player and person for having that year. I was very, as I said, lucky to be able to take that year and take that time to become better. I could have plowed through, and keep in mind also that by making that decision, I destroyed any chance that I had of ever coming back with the national team. And so therefore the 2002 World Cup, that was out the window the minute I decided not to play that year. But I don't regret it for a second, in that all of the different things, like I said. And it also introduced me to something that later would become such a huge part of my life, which was television. I did a television show for ESPN and I became friends with, because I had met Rob Stone before. But Rob Stone and I did a television show, a weekly television show that we recorded in Tulsa, Oklahoma. So it introduced me to so many things that have become a huge part of my life. And I was very lucky to have had that year. And I look back on it with fondness of all of the different things that I was able to experience. I didn't know it at the time that it was going to be so important. And I cried like a baby, even making the decision. I remember in the locker room, finding a empty part of the locker room and just crying like a baby, because that period of my life I knew was coming to a close. And I didn't know where that next period was going to lead me. And certainly in the next year without the game, how I was going to function, because that was all I knew. But it worked out okay. And I'm glad that I was able to do that. Mosse, anything else that you wanted to touch on this week when it comes to soccer or not soccer? We started out talking about my complete panning of the Spurs documentary, and we end with me talking about my rebirth and my enlightening, if you will, in the year 2000, as I traipsed across the country and chased my to-be wife and got into television. I also did the Olympics, by the way. I went to Sydney, Australia, worked with Andreas Kantor and NBC and did the Olympics down there. So it was an eventful year.
Well, you said your post-playing career has worked out okay. You're hosting a podcast with me that's produced by Alex Dowd and Luis Aguilar, so it hasn't worked out that well.
I wouldn't have it any other way, gentlemen. It's always a pleasure to be hanging out with you. Mosse, have a great week. We got some MLS action that we will be doing. You got any Liga MX or stuff on tap? What do you got for this week? Anything?
Yes. Next one is this upcoming Saturday. I want to say it's Monterrey against Tigres, but let me double check that.
That's all right. That's all right. But you're working Liga MX. I know you're hard at work at that. I'm watching, and as I said, we got some MLS midweek action that we will be talking about when it comes to the things that are going on, both the game that we're doing and bigger picture stuff that's going on with MLS. So tune into that. Thank you so much, as always, for downloading and rating and subscribing to the podcast. We appreciate it, and we are incredibly humbled by the fact that so many of you do this on a weekly basis. We will see, and you will hear from us again next week. And until then, size the day.
You like that clip? Well, my State of the Union podcast drops every week. Subscribe now on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts.